Hey folks, Professor Finn here, and today we're going to be looking at Chapter 16 of Ralph Klicker's Funeral Directing and Funeral Service Management. These last couple of chapters are going to be relatively short lectures, so let's go ahead and get the lecture up and talk about aftercare. So aftercare continues to be an issue that funeral directors struggle to embrace. Now, the book is somewhat dated. The industry has gotten a lot better with aftercare, and there are some really amazing things out there for the quote-unquote aftercare market. Stats are confusing due to a lack of studies. 3% to 33% of funeral firms offer some type of aftercare. And I don't think a great many studies have been done since then to lock down how many firms are doing it. But it is very well established at this point that aftercare is important. And I would probably say that there are a majority of firms providing some level of aftercare no matter what it is. Aftercare is a means of supplying support to a family after a death, usually lasts about 1 year. So the most common form of aftercare, I think, is informational-oriented services. Send family grief-oriented literature, mailing cards, letters, brochures, books, newsletters, or a directory of local grief services. You have direct care, which is one-on-one counseling. So you have a grief counselor on staff. You sponsor a support group at your funeral home. You offer seminars, special ceremonies, personal visits to the family's home by a funeral home staff member. Some funeral homes have gone so far to actually hiring a licensed clinician to keep on their staff. Many of these clinicians are not licensed funeral directors. They are thanatologists. They practice in grief work. There are also others who are licensed funeral directors who then go through and get a degree in psychology and obtain a licensed mental health therapist license or licensed clinician's license, depending on what they call it in your jurisdiction. So aftercare is not limited to funeral service. Hospice and organ donation groups have been doing aftercare for years. This is something that they are very, very good at. When I was the president of the Pinellas County Funeral Homes Association, and I believe that is now called the Suncoast Funeral Home Association, we visited the Lions Eye Bank, I think it was. And they were talking about, no, it wasn't the Lions Eye Bank. It was, I think, the Southeastern Tissue Alliance. They did a tour of their facility and how they do tissue procurement and how they differ from organ donation. And they had testimonials. They had family members there talk about the giving the gift and receiving the gift and all of that. And the services they offer their families who either receive or donate. So very, very comprehensive services. And funeral homes are kind of a little bit late to the game on that. Ideally, aftercare should come from strongly sympathetic and supportive friends and family, but due to dysfunction, geographical limits, and lack of support network, it may be necessary for others to assist in this process. And funeral service is a natural fit to make up this shortfall. Studies are few and far between, so some practitioners remain skeptical about it. This is especially important if the death was unusual. Now, the one thing that has changed since the publication of this book, and even from the time that I was in practice 10, 12 years ago, that aftercare has really been looked at as a value-added service, not as a means to sell pre-need, but a value that is added to the services of the funeral home and to engage people in their grief journey. I think when I first started, we were still in the middle of the era where aftercare is all about pre-need and getting them to come in and do something. And there are certainly individuals that still do what I feel that is very unethical, to use your aftercare program as a pre-need sales thing. But you are engaging them because it is the healthy thing to do. And funeral homes, hey, nothing says you can't engage a grief support group in your area, offer the services of your funeral home, and one night a week keep the funeral home open 2 extra hours. The group meets from 5:30 to 7 or something like that. And one of your on-call employees, well, whoever's on call that night, you basically sit around the funeral home keeping it open if you don't have an employee that's in charge of the group. So there are ways that you can build this into your business model, or even offer it on weekends during normal operational days where your funeral home is already open, and maybe that's a day you don't have a lot going on historically. So there are ways to integrate this into your business that I think people need to look at, because this is rapidly becoming a value-added service and transitioning into a necessary service that funeral homes should offer. Now, the funeral home cannot eliminate the effects of grief, but it can mitigate the loneliness, confusion, isolation, and despair that follows, even in very limited programs. For 3 years, I was part of the lay pastoral ministry program in the Diocese of St. Petersburg, Florida, and this was an area that I was going to be going in on, doing facilitating grief sessions, either through local churches and parishes or at the funeral homes I worked at. Now, one thing I will tell you is that anyone that is in one of these groups absolutely gets something out of it. My observations of my time working in those groups was the appearance that the people participating were absolutely finding it beneficial to them in the way they spoke and interact, and even brought others from their families. Remember one time this widow ended up bringing her grandson, so that he could come in and he could share and he could participate. And then he started attending regularly. So, when you can get a teenager to do something that really is quote unquote not cool, that says something, that the teenager wants to come to this and listen and talk. And that's how they start. They come, they listen, they don't really share. And then when they feel like talking, they start talking. And then usually once they start talking, they're not going to stop. The internet can be a part of a funeral home aftercare program. There are tons of things on the internet. Things like web searches, condolence sections, or even displaying of videotape services can help. And that is very true. I mean, now you even have lectures like this on the internet where you can come in and learn about this, whether you're going to mortuary school or you're just an interested layperson. So you're understanding how grief works, etc. And one of the best resources on the internet is Dr. Alan Wolfeld's Center for Loss and Life Transition. And I think that is www.centerforloss.com or .org. Aftercare should not be a revenue generator. The revenue will come from repeat customers due to excellent service, not follow-up sales. I remember having a conversation one time that a widow had a service at one of our funeral homes for the company I worked at. And the cemetery reached out to her about a day or so after the funeral and actually got her to come in and sign a funeral service with the funeral home on the cemetery property. And when we called to do our aftercare and follow-up, we found out that, she'd already signed because the nice person from the cemetery had called, and she thought it was a good idea. And the reaction to that was, we will absolutely call people, the evening after or whatever to get them to come in as soon as possible. Now, me personally, hey, if I lose one, I lose one. But I am not looking at my aftercare as a revenue generator like that. And some business owners might say, well, that's because you've never owned a business. Maybe, but I'm in charge of a business right now, and granted, I don't have a lot of aftercare because it's education and schooling. I do feel that when you start selling your soul for stuff like that, that is the wrong way you want to take that business. The couple of things you get, probably not the way you want to go. So aftercare needs to be about the aftercare and helping the client. And if you want to focus on pre-need sales, hey, that's fine. I've had people after the funeral come in and say, hey, I want to make my arrangements. And absolutely, I'll sit down, do all the grunt work, hand it over to a pre-need counselor to write the insurance policy, and away we go. I have no issue with that. I've also had people tell me as I'm handing them the book, I need to come in and do this. And I have told, and I'm sure that there's a small population of funeral directors and licensed professionals out there who are going to say, oh, you want to step into the room and do it now? Like, dude, seriously? Like, wow. That's a little ridiculous for me. But when they do say things like that, absolutely say, well, it's a very wise decision to do things like that, and I'm certainly going to encourage you to get your affairs in order, because that way you will have the satisfaction of knowing it's done. How about we plan for something maybe next week? Today's not the day to do it. Today's the day to be with your family. And they come in next week. It's that simple. So, yeah, you might lose one to a hard sale, someone scalping it or sniping it out from under you, but I don't think that that might necessarily be a reason for you to go ahead and change your business model so that you're even quicker on the draw than they are for something like that. I think that's just an unfortunate situation. But what do I know? I'm just here to provide you lectures on the internet. That being said, that concludes this lecture, and we'll see you next video.